Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. For the first time in 28 years, the World Congress of Political Science was held here in South Korea, a country navigating a complex political moment just months after the December 3rd martial law incident and the election of a new administration. At a time when democratic backsliding is being reported across the globe, South Korea is drawing attention for its civic resilience and evolving democratic model. President Lee Jae Myung, in his opening address, introduced the concept of K-Democracy, asserting that democracy must prove it can put food on this table, that freedom is the economy. But even as Korea is celebrated, questions persist. How much of its authoritarian past still shapes its politics, and how does its democracy stack up against global standards? To help us unpack these questions, we are joined by Ji-yeon Hong, Associate Professor of Political Science and Korea Foundation Professor of Korean Studies at the University of Michigan, who also attended the Congress in person. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Professor, let's start a discussion right away. The World Congress of Political Science was held in Korea for the first time, like I've said, in more than 20 years. You were there in person. What do you think was the most significant message this Congress delivered to the global political science community, especially considering, Korea's recent governmental transition after the martial law incident last year?
So the 2025 World Congress of International Political Science Association, it carried a central theme. The theme was resisting autocratization in polarized societies. So the Congress brought together thousands of political scientists from around the world to address growing threats to democracy in an era marked by polarization, populism, and institutional erosion. President Lee Jae Myung delivered a keynote speech titled K-Democracy Toward a New Era, in which he emphasized the importance of rebuilding democratic trust after a recent political crisis in South Korea, which you mentioned as well, and called for a global commitment to combating inequality and defending democratic norms in digital era. I personally participated in the present plenary, where scholars from the United States, Mexico, Poland, Turkey, and I from South Korea explored the global rise of populism and increasing polarization. We examined their detrimental effects on democratic institutions and citizens' belief and attitude toward democracy. The panel combined various empirical cases around the world, from Latin America to East Asia, and discussed potential strategies for resisting authoritarian drift around the world.
Well, it really does seem like a very symbolic moment that was held at a very meaningful time. So with global democratic decline increasingly evident, Professor, how is Korea's civil society, particularly its political resilience and democratic capacity, being evaluated on the global stage?
I think the global audience, including academics, scholars, and policymakers, closely followed Korea's political crisis after the President Yoon's unconstitutional declaration of martial law, which marked as an event not only shocking, but also triggered very widespread alarm about democratic backsliding and then health of global democracy. And what stood out the most during the crisis, month-long crisis, was extraordinary response from Korean civil society and in cooperation with lawmakers. Citizens and legislative members from across different ideological lines mobilized really quickly, swiftly, through different forms of participation, including mass protests, legal petitions, and public advocacy. and even like small actions like giving interviews or participating in small and big events, political events, to defend democratic norms together. So this spontaneous and very broad-based mobilization across the country definitely drew international attention as a very compelling case of Korea's democratic resilience. Yet, I think as a political scientist, I believe civil society sort of reaction to political crisis, it's really precious action, but it's not enough to safeguard the democracy itself in the long run. Enduring democracy really depends on strength of institutions like political parties and political parties' commitment to democratic norms, which and also a lot of members of society should not only react to political crisis itself, but also be able to, in our daily lives, stand along with the democratic norms.
Right. Like you said, it was a very important moment for K-Democracy. And let's hope that this steps would further develop as we move forward. Now going back to the event, President Lee Jae Myung, during the opening ceremony of the Congress, highlighted the achievements of what he called K-Democracy. He also stressed the importance of proving that democracy can feed the people. How should we interpret that statement, Professor?
Democracy should be able to feed the people is definitely a new but very appealing concept proposed by President Lee. I, of course, think about what that new definition of K-democracy would imply for Korea and also for democracy around the world. I think my personal interpretations are in three dimension of democracy from this new concept, a new proposed concept. First, I saw very clearly that political crisis itself has a detrimental impact on economy. So in a way, political stability and commitment to democracy is really essential for economic stability itself. We saw during the political crisis in beginning in December 3rd that lasted until the election of new president, Korea actually went through a lot of economic difficulties, not only economic growth slowed down, but like a lot of instabilities in economy. So protecting democracy is ultimately a very important and fundamental way to protect our economic prosperity. Second, while democracy is not a perfect in many days of times, but it still remains as the most sustainable political system where we can resolve a lot of potential conflict in a peaceful manner. So market economy naturally produce a lot of tensions in a society, economic inequality, social divisions, and exclusion. I think democracy gives a really important framework for us to go through these potential conflict that economic growth and even economic growth and prosperity can bring about. And it can be resolved only through negotiation and compromise and legal resolutions that healthy democracy can provide. And finally, I think we cannot ignore the fact that the global rise of the far right is deeply connected to the loss of economic opportunities and representation in many societies, and definitely the rise of far right group is a concerning phenomenon in South Korea as well. So, but I do believe the rise of far right really gets worse when people feel excluded from the politics, from the general discussion in the country. So to build a democracy that can include diverse group of people and make no one feel left behind is really important to prevent this concerning phenomena to become like big wave that becomes dominant in the politics.
So it was a very powerful statement indeed, blending democratic values with economic expectations. It's really no small claim. That was very impactful on that. But building on this, Professor, in your view, then what are the key strengths of K-democracy?
That's a really big question, hard question as well. I think as a scholar who study history, political history, and authoritarian past of the country, and also authoritarian politics around the world, I think when we talk about K-democracy, it's most important to think about the culture of participation by ordinary citizens. So Korean citizens are not just passive observers of politics. They don't participate just election day as a voter. I think Korean citizens are very engaged and informed and often participate in politics in different forms other than just simple voting. So sometimes voting is the most important probably one of the most important forms of participation, but a lot of people also participate in protests, petition, civil societies, various initiatives, donation, volunteering, etc. Turnout has been historically high in Korea, and then Korean voters have been sort of switching their support between more conservative alternatives and then progressive alternatives. So I think that's really, really phenomenal. And this culture of participation definitely didn't occur overnight. The historical roots are definitely from the past of political democratization in the country, the movement for democracy in the 1970s and 1980s under military dictatorship, and the collective memories that Korean citizens share about that past of struggles, and then very difficult moving forward to democracy really resonate even today. And also it led to very strong civic organizations in 1990s and beyond, which has been a very strong hold for democracy in Korea. And another factor I think institutionally was important for Korean democracy was that elections never stopped in Korean history. Although it went through authoritarian past, a lot of countries experience entire abolishment of election after country became dictatorship. But in Korean case, the election existed, and then it was also important for non-democratic leaders in Korea to gain legitimacy through election. I think that sort of experience throughout the history. So Korea now have almost 80 years of experience with elections. That itself, as a history, really build up smart and balanced voters in Korea.
So this active participation by ordinary citizens, it definitely became a key strength, which roots from Korean histories. Now, speaking of historical roots, Professor, you've mentioned Korea's political system began under a legacy of authoritarian military rule. Given your research on authoritarianism and political economies, do you see remnants of that legacy still influencing Korean politics lately? And if so, in what ways does it manifest?
I think it is important to recognize that all democracies basically carry some legacies of authoritarian and non-democratic rules. If you think about the long history of mankind, basically, it in the past, the politics has been dictatorship in a way. The ruler changes, but election or representation of ordinary citizens is really, in a broader scope of history, is a relatively new form of governance. And in that way, no country is completely free from the weight of its authoritarian past. In Korean case, I think one of the lasting challenges that are related to authoritarian past is, I think, sort of the culture that created by over-dependence on ideological conflict, particularly in relation to North Korea. So while I do sense that North Korea related issue has become somewhat less critical, less central in political debate today than it was before, the sort of intense military and ideological tensions of the past have left a deeply rooted culture in Korean politics. So to summarize sort of these remnant in 3 words, I think those are hierarchy, uniformity, and exclusivity. So despite a lot of changes that Korean politics has gone through, it still remain, especially to younger voters' perspective, it still tends to revolve around who holds the power, who holds the authority, rather than encouraging individuals to act based on their own independent beliefs and values. So this, I think this could be authoritarian, legacy of authoritarian ruling, could be long-lasting, could be the remnant of long-lasting two-party system, or perhaps a deeply rooted, even more deeper rooted cultural norms. But I do believe healthy democracy thrives on diverse voices, pluralism, and inclusion. In that way, we can respond more actively to future changes that we couldn't foresee before it happened. And political decisions that is filtered through very rigid hierarchy and demand for unity, and basically exclude outside voices or outgroup voices. I think it, in a way, it cannot prevent future conflict in a healthy way, in a effective way.
Well, Professor, let's also touch upon elite structures. We hear that you've held long-standing research on that area. So based on this, what improvements do you think are needed in the elite-centered political structure of Korean parties today?
Again, very important and hard question. Recently, I had a research opportunity to analyze the full data set of National Assembly members since South Korea's democratization. One clear pattern that stood out in that analysis was both major parties, both conservative and progressive major parties, have been heavily reliant on politicians with elite background in terms of their formal occupation and educational attainment. The most represented backgrounds include former bureaucrats, business executives, professors, and longtime party insiders. Most lawmakers also come from top university backgrounds. These patterns, I mean, it's good to have capable and prominent politician, but it's concerning whether these elite-centric National Assembly can truly represent the entire body of citizens that South Korea has. And then another, what's really interesting in this analysis was that both parties shows quite similar representation as well. Both parties were quite well represented by so-called elite background groups. The only notable difference was the Progressive Party tend to have more lawmakers from civil society or activist backgrounds, while the Conservative Party have more tend to include more former prosecutors and judges. So I think to overcome this, we need a really stronger pathway for ordinary citizens, not necessarily with elite background or older age group, to be able to enter national politics. I believe one promising direction is to promote political talents through local governments and local councils. I mean, this pattern is already shown. There are some very promising politicians coming from local representation and including local council or mayor office, and then they sort of grew further as a national politician. So this might require restructuring the political and administrative structure to give more authority to local governments and councils and make local politics become more independent from what's going on in the central politics. But a more decentralized political system, I believe, could provide space for young, diverse leaders that could be grow into those who could grow into national leader in the future.
Right. So that would be definitely an important way to help diversify the nation's leadership. And it'll be interesting to see how such efforts to alleviate the elite structures would happen in the near future. Now, Professor, we've been discussing a lot about the nation's democracy. Before we let you go, could you tell us what kind of direction do you think Korea's K-democracy should take moving forward?
I think K-democracy already proved a lot, especially in the past few months. Among many things, it definitely proved that the democracy can be very resilient. Democracy can go through constitutional crisis, and it can come back to the right track, and then become as strong as before. But now I think K-democracy faces a different kind of challenge. The question is no longer for K-democracy, no longer can we defend democracy, but can our democracy deliver what we need? I think many Koreans are deeply anxious, not only about political stability, which many citizens were concerned about going through the constitutional crisis, but about their economic perspectives, social mobility, and future of themselves and future of their children it will inherit. This is where I believe K-democracy must go next. It must become a democracy that democracy can solve problems, not just protect democratic procedures.
Right. So even though challenges still remain, South Korea's democratic journey will have to continue to keep tabs on that. But let's hope it both gave lessons to Korea and other countries on the world who are navigating a new era. Now, we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Hong. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.